Hey there, friends. Welcome back. 2024 is going to be a rather difficult year, I think, for a lot of us. And so what I wanted to do is just reach out to you guys real quick before today's video and tell you guys to follow our Twitter account. The reason being is Twitter is a much better managed social media site. So in the event that something happens, at least there we can still connect, have these conversations, and stay informed. Not going anywhere off of here just yet, but I want to protect what we've been building, and I'd like to see as many of you over on X as I can possibly see. Do you guys remember that line in Pirates of the Caribbean when Miss Turner says to Pirate, "I don't believe in fairy tales," and he looks at her and he says, "Well, you better believe in fairy tales, Miss Turner, because you're living in one." That kind of reminds me of the situation that we're dealing with right now globally with these outbreaks of regional wars that are going to spill over into a much larger conflict. If you are one of those people who's just in complete denial that we're in a period of time that's going to lead into a lot of global conflict, wake up. The world has gone completely mad. Last week, we saw the peaceful state of Ecuador erupt into civil war between the government and what Western media is attributing to drug cartels. Whether they're drug cartels or not, I don't know. I don't live in Ecuador. But it is just another conflict that we should watch because it's right there in our back door. And if you think that some of these things that happen south of the border don't impact us, you're absolutely wrong. Just check out the border. What I find more concerning is some of the reports that have been coming out of Sweden and Germany over the last week. So the people of Sweden last week went into a panic prep mode. They started buying whatever supplies they needed to prepare themselves to be in a wartime environment. This is because one of the defense chiefs, a prominent figure who should know what's going on, basically told everybody, hey, you need to prepare for war. He wants people to be independently prepared for the worst case scenario, and he wants them to do it now. That in and of itself wouldn't be that concerning. It's not unusual for a government, unless you're the United States, to say, hey, you guys need to be independently taking care of yourself. If you live in the US, they're gonna still offer to do it for you regardless of what's going on. But what I do find concerning is that Germany, over the weekend, it was revealed that Germany had handed out kind of a secretive training program. And basically this document was preparing their military and other officials, etc., for the possibility of direct war with Russia. And it wasn't, months away, years ago. It was like, this could happen in the next several days, next week or so. So if you have two countries preparing to go to war, the possibility of going to war with Russia. And Finland, actually, that's a third country. How many other European countries do you think are preparing their top officials, preparing their militaries, or in Sweden's case, preparing their people for direct conflict with Russia? And why? It's not a secret, I think, at this point in time that Ukraine has all but lost the war against Russia. And I really don't think that Russia has any intention to invade Finland, to invade Sweden, to invade Germany. But all of these countries are warning their civilians, warning their militaries, sending out training programs to prepare to go to war with Russia. I don't think that Ukraine losing the war with Russia is an acceptable outcome to a lot of our Western leaders. I would prepare for escalation. Escalation is the new word for 2024. Right? In 2021 in the US, the word was insurrection. This year, it's escalation. You're going to start hearing the term escalation. This escalated this escalated that. This was an escalation. For nearly everything that happens, whether somebody did something out of retaliation or whatever, it's always going to lead to the word escalation. Whoever moves their pawn next is going to escalate the global conflicts. And there are lots of pawns to move, but the escalation is getting more and more severe. They're starting to bring out their knights, they're starting to bring out their bishops. I don't think we're gonna hear the word diplomacy for a very long time. I think it's all gonna be escalation. If you look at the Israel-Hamas war, it is a perfect example of escalation. Hamas invaded Israel and they killed a lot of people. And granted, if somebody invaded our country, we would probably retaliate against them. We would probably do something in retribution. But Israel reacted with more than retaliation, with more than retribution. Over 20,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed since this conflict erupted. What Israel has done is something that I call escalation. Once Israel escalated the conflict to go well beyond retribution, what do you have? You have Hezbollah attacking Israel. Then Israel responds to Hezbollah, killing the leader's brother, or was it son? I think it was his brother. And now Hezbollah is expected to escalate even further. And then we know this because last week, Israel, and I don't know if you guys read this in the newspapers or not, because it was mainly in newspapers over there. I didn't see a lot of big media articles on this, but Israel started telling its northern hospitals along the border of Lebanon to start preparing for thousands of trauma patients and to be ready to operate in an isolated island situation, which means they're telling their hospitals, hey, you guys need to stock up and be prepared to operate without any contact, outside contact, to operate as if you were on a desert island somewhere and nobody could get to you, and prepare for thousands of trauma patients. What do you think is about to happen on the Lebanon border? The question is, have they done enough to escalate it? Now, President Magoo, and most of you know who I'm talking about, has made his support for Israel very clear since the very beginning of this conflict. And personally, I don't know whose side you should be on or we should be on. I don't know anything about Palestinians or people who live in Israel. I know people from both places. They all seem like great people. I know people. And that's the thing, is that people never ask for war. Palestinians don't ask for war. People of Israel don't ask for war. Ukrainians don't ask for war. Russians don't ask for war. It's usually the authoritative leadership that leads them into war, and then they just become the casualties of it. Without being entrenched in all of the information, I think it's actually a lot more difficult to choose sides in a lot of these things. And I warned you guys, when this war broke out, it would tear people in the U.S. apart. And look what it's done. You've had protesters beating up protesters because nobody can decide which side of the conflict that they need to be on a conflict that's happening on the other side of the world. It makes no logical sense to me why I should be involved in a conflict on the other side of the world. But I do see how that conflict is starting to impact us because of the U.S.'s involvement. Because of the West's involvement in that war, Yemen escalated the situation by attacking shipping containers that are going to the West. Now, they mask it by saying this has to do with Israel, has to do with anybody supporting Israel. And that then impacts you and I and everybody else, because all of a sudden it costs 5 or 6 times the amount of money to ship the goods and services that we need, or not services, I guess if you're on Epstein's Island, services, but the goods from all over the world to us. It increases the cost of that. Now, here's that word escalation again, because last week, the U.S. responded with Britain by bombing over 60 targets in Yemen to attack the Yemen Houthis. It's not Yemen, it's the Houthis, right, that are attacking these ships. That was an escalation. And it was actually an escalation that probably should have had congressional approval beforehand, because we just basically bombed the heck out of another country. And that escalation actually had a response from Iran, because what we saw literally a couple days later was Iran go after a large oil tanker. And Iran didn't stop there, no, because just the other night, Iran bombed the heck out of several targets in Syria, northern Syria, and Iraq. These targets were supposed to be Israeli spy organizations or whatever. They shot them up with ballistic missiles. Escalation. A lot of people don't realize this, but Magoo has had special forces in Israel in this conflict. He's had military in this conflict since the conflict originally began. Yemen wasn't the first place to get bombed. Places in Iraq where, our troops have been fighting since day one of this event. We've had special forces on the ground helping Israel know where to bomb in Gaza. We've had we literally just lost 2 Navy SEALs last weekend who were trying to intercept weapons being shipped to Yemen from Iran on a vessel. One of them got knocked off of a ladder while trying to board the vessel. Another one jumped overboard to save him because they're American heroes and that's what heroes do. Both of them ended up being lost at sea. His vessel carrying these weapons, initially, the U.S. said it had nothing to do with the war, nothing to do with Yemen. But as we have found out, this ship that was carrying these warheads, they ended up sinking because it was unsafe. And now they have whoever was on the ship in interrogation, and you can bet that's going to be up to par. I've also warned from the very beginning of this conflict that I think that this conflict is a trap, and I do not think that President Magoo has the wherewithal to navigate us through that trap. And I don't care which side you're choosing to be on, because I don't know enough about people halfway around the world to decide whose side I want to be on. What I care about is the conflict unfolding and how our involvement is unfolding in that conflict. And we have already gone beyond a lot of the escalation that I thought we would have in this shorter period of time. I mean, things are escalating fairly quickly. We are literally grazing each other's heads with bullets from Iran, between Iran and the US right now, Iran and Britain. And when one of those bullets strikes somebody directly, you're gonna have a massive conflict break out. And it's not just Iran and the Houthis and whoever. This is a much larger conflict. Not everybody that you think would be on our side is going to be on our side in this conflict. And the BRICS nations know that. And I'm saying this because we've been in a currency war for some time, and I'm concerned about what's going to happen to the US currency as we go through the next couple years. But this is an opportunity for most of those Eastern allies to essentially change the global environment of control. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. And they're not the only players out there. I mean, there are many, many players who are constantly pushing for a new order of control globally. And they're going to do whatever they can to weaken the United States going into these situations, to drag them into these situations. They have, I mean, China has ships that are literally at the mouth of the Red Sea right now, just sitting there waiting and observing. And they're observing all of the tactics that we use to respond. They're observing a lot of things. They're taking it all in. And they're watching us use all of our resources to fight these conflicts. And when we get weak enough, when we can't possibly figure out ways to continue to fund multiple war fronts, because that's what we're on right now. We're on multiple war fronts. We've already had to kind of fold the towel a little bit on Ukraine. But I think this entire thing is a trap, and I don't want to find out what's on the other side of that trap door. I think that what we should be doing is doing everything we can to mitigate the situation and figure out the best solution out of it. But all we're seeing is escalation. And I don't think that there is anybody right now that's going to de-escalate. I think everybody's going to continue to escalate. And the biggest problem with that is that when you're dealing with countries like Russia, when you're talking about the possibility of direct conflict with Russia, like Sweden and Germany, Finland have all done in recent days, recent weeks, when you're talking about direct conflict with a country like Iran, you're talking about direct conflict with nuclear powers, and those nuclear powers don't want to lose. And they have friends. Have I mentioned lately that North Korea has been on another ballistic missile kick? I don't care whose side you think you should be on, whose side is right or wrong. What I care about is warning every single one of you right now to prepare to go to war. Because if this conflict continues to escalate, which it most likely will, it's not going to be contained to those areas. And you and I are going to be impacted. We already are impacted. Think about it. Think about the new inflation cycle that's about to begin because of the costs of shipping, because of the costs of oil, because of the costs of food, because of this new conflict in the Middle East, not to mention the conflict that's been going on in Ukraine. We've entered into a new inflation cycle that nobody's going to be able to do anything about. The cost of oil, the cost of grain, the cost of food that's coming from these other areas. And even if we here in the United States do not import from some of those areas. People always mention that to me. Well, we don't even import through there. It's mainly affecting Europe. Well, now we're in competition with Europe, and that's going to push inflation for us. By the time this conflict reaches to a point, because if it continues to escalate, it will not stay overseas. For those of us who live in America and think we're on this isolated island that will never see a conflict, well, we saw 9/11. I know what some of you have to say about that. I think if this situation keeps escalating, you will see some sort of conflict here in the United States. You will most likely at least see some terrorist cells erupt with activity here in the United States, if not something worse, if not missiles coming to the United States. There could be a whole trove of possibilities if this continues to escalate. And some of you think I'm crazy for thinking that, but believe me, I'm not. World War I and World War II didn't just, I bet you people thought people were crazy back then for thinking those wars would break out. And look what happened. We have never seen global conflict on this wide a scale in our lifetime. You guys need to get your head out of the sand, start preparing. And you know what? If I am wrong, which I hope I'm wrong, you know, everybody, I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to see conflict. I didn't ask for war. But if I'm wrong, then you're just going to be stockpiled for the next event. Because here's the thing is, we're used to seeing these events unfold decadally, and then it became every 7 years, every 5 years. Now it's within every so many months, something else is happening, to the point where the last conflict is far from conclusion. So we're just starting to stockpile all the conflicts. And eventually that branch is going to snap. I mean, who knows? Here in the US, maybe that branch snaps with the election 2024. I don't know. All I know is there's a lot of crazy going on. And what I want to see people in my community do is prepare themselves to deal with these situations. I want to see people be self-sufficient, self-reliant, so that they are able to deal with these catastrophes as they start to impact us more than they already have, because they're already starting to impact us. It's just a lot of people, if they don't see it, they're not in it, they don't feel it. Most of the time they feel they can choose a side with the knowledge that they have. But most of those people don't realize that those conflicts could very easily make themselves here. They can make themselves right here to the United States. So get with the program, folks. Don't be a fool.